No, we've actually really enjoyed being with each other.
Well,
He's
that's
one of my
good.
favorite people in the world.
Whether they like it or not, they're never getting.
He won't leave me alone.
What happens when Marvel's Golden Boy becomes its biggest liability? When the studio that turns actors into icons suddenly decides you're too controlling to keep. In Hollywood, scandals usually trickle out in whispers. A paparazzi photo here, an anonymous source there. But this one? It hit like a lightning strike. Pedro Pascal, fresh off his rise as the internet's favorite leading man, had just landed what was supposed to be the role of a lifetime. Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, in Marvel's long-awaited reboot of Fantastic Four. Billboards in Times Square, teasers breaking viewership records, merch deals lined up months before filming even wrapped. It wasn't just a movie, it was the MCU's reset button. And then, less than 2 weeks after release, the headlines shifted from Marvel's new era to box office disaster.
It's been a dream to join the MCU. The movie is called The Fantastic Four. I'll confess, I did all my stretching.
Merchandise collected dust on store shelves, audience scores plummeted, and Pedro? He wasn't posting behind-the-scenes photos, he wasn't thanking fans, and he wasn't defending the movie. He was gone. A private Gulfstream jet. New York to Dubai. The booking traced back to his own management agency. No premiere appearances, no press interviews, no explanations. And that's when the whispers started. Was he running from the backlash? From Marvel's lawyers? Or from something far bigger? Because behind the scenes, the fallout wasn't just about bad reviews. It was about broken contracts, buried cameos, and a studio scrambling to erase him from the very franchise he was meant to lead.
There's a lot of Marvel movies. If you're in the top 5, you're doing well.
This is the story of how Pedro Pascal went from Marvel's brightest star to its most expensive mistake, and how it all started before a single ticket was even sold. Years before the cameras rolled, Marvel fans had been fantasizing about a proper Fantastic Four reboot. The 2005 version was campy. The 2015 version was, well, let's not talk about that. For the MCU faithful, Fantastic Four was the crown jewel waiting to be polished, and Reed Richards was the key. Rumors of Pedro Pascal taking the role first surfaced in late 2022. The reaction? A tidal wave of memes, fan art, and think pieces. Some called it inspired casting. The charming rogue from The Mandalorian and The Last of Us finally stepping into a genius, stoic Marvel hero. Others, not so sure. Reed Richards, in the comics, is reserved, almost cold. Pedro was warm, witty, often sarcastic. Could he pull it off? Marvel didn't seem worried. They leaned into the hype, dropping subtle teases in interviews and social media posts. At one point, an accidental leak showed Pedro in a lab coat on set. Whether it was staged or not, it exploded online. Hashtags trended for days. Merch pre-orders opened before the trailer even dropped. Inside Marvel Studios, expectations were sky high. Kevin Feige himself reportedly called Pedro the linchpin of Phase 7. The budget ballooned past $300 million, not including marketing. They brought in an Oscar-nominated cinematographer, a new director with a visionary label, and built massive sets to capture the grandeur of the MCU's first family. But with all that hype came a dangerous side effect: zero room for failure. This wasn't just another superhero flick. This was supposed to fix Marvel's reputation after Eternals and Ant-Man: Quantumania. One executive even joked, "If this tanks, we're done making movies with numbers in the title." In hindsight, not so funny. Even before release, small cracks began to show. The reshoot schedule quietly doubled. Leaked set photos showed rewrites happening mid-scene, and insiders whispered that Pedro was heavily involved in changing dialogue, sometimes right before the cameras rolled. At first, it sounded like a dedicated actor shaping his role. Later, it would sound like the first sign of a brewing storm. Opening weekend was supposed to be a victory lap. Instead, it was a public dissection. The first reviews hit on Thursday night. Words like chaotic, tonally confused, and weirdly empty started popping up on Rotten Tomatoes. By Friday morning, social media was savage. Clips of Pedro's line delivery went viral for all the wrong reasons. A scene meant to be tense was edited into TikTok skits with captions like "Mr. Confused" and "Did he just wake up?" Fans debated whether Marvel had miscast him entirely. Some said it felt like Pedro was acting in a completely different movie. One sarcastic Letterboxd review read, "They should have cast AI on Deech. At least it wouldn't mumble." Still, Marvel hoped word of mouth would save them. It didn't. By Sunday night, projections had been slashed by 60%. The Monday box office numbers confirmed the nightmare. One of the worst box office numbers in MCU history. And it wasn't just the box office. Merchandise, the real moneymaker for Marvel, was a disaster. Action figures sat untouched in Walmart and Target. Collectible sets were marked down before the second weekend. Some stores even moved Fantastic Four toys to clearance bins within 5 days of release. But the most damaging sign wasn't in sales, it was in silence. Marvel, a studio famous for flooding the internet with interviews, behind-the-scenes clips, and cast banter, suddenly went quiet. No extra trailers, no talk show appearances. And Pedro? He was nowhere. Not on Instagram, not on Twitter, not even a generic "thanks for watching" post. Fans noticed. Reddit threads began tracking his absence, speculating about secret disputes. One top comment simply read, "You don't go this silent unless something's on fire." They weren't wrong, because behind that silence was a storm that had been building for months. One that would turn Marvel's dream reboot into a billion-dollar embarrassment, and Pedro Pascal into the center of Hollywood's most talked-about vanishing act. The premiere was supposed to be the reset button. Weeks of negative press could have been softened by a few glowing red carpet photos, charming interviews, and a couple of well-timed fan interactions. Marvel had the entire rollout planned to the hour. Pedro Pascal was booked for Good Morning America, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and a high-profile fan Q&A in Los Angeles. Billboards around Hollywood were lit up with his face. The Fantastic Four global premiere event was to be his grand moment, a literal stage for him to reclaim the narrative. But then, in the hours leading up to the premiere, nothing. No Pedro, no public statement, not even a last-minute cancellation post from his team. Journalists were quietly told he had scheduling conflicts. His co-stars walked the carpet alone, dodging questions about his absence. Fans weren't buying it. Within minutes, at where? His Pedro started trending on Twitter. Some guessed it was a PR strategy. Maybe he'd show up at the last second, a surprise appearance to generate buzz. Others weren't so optimistic. And then came the jet. A private Gulfstream G550 was spotted leaving New York's Teterboro Airport, bound for Dubai. The booking was traced to Pedro's own management agency. No entourage, no co-stars, no Marvel reps. He was simply gone. For anyone unfamiliar with Hollywood escape routes, Dubai isn't just a vacation spot. It's where celebrities go when they want to disappear. No TMZ hiding in hotel lobbies, no paparazzi ambushing you at the airport. Just luxury penthouses, private beaches, and a media environment so tightly controlled, even rumors rarely get out. The timing made it impossible to ignore. The flight left the same day Marvel executives reportedly held an emergency meeting about Fantastic Four's collapse. Industry blogs began connecting dots, suggesting Marvel's lawyers were exploring morality clause violations in Pedro's contract, the kind that can lead to massive paybacks. One headline put it bluntly, from Marvel's lead to Marvel's liability in 72 hours. Marvel said nothing. Pedro said nothing. But the silence spoke louder than any press release. If this had been a simple case of bad reviews, the studio could have weathered it. But whispers were growing. Whispers that Pedro wasn't just absent, he was avoiding Marvel. And those whispers were about to become a full-blown PR explosion. When a film bombs, the safest move for an actor is to thank the fans, show humility, and let the storm pass. Pedro Pascal didn't do that. Out of nowhere, clips from a pre-release interview surfaced. In one, Pedro smirked and said, "I'm not here to spoon-feed nostalgia to people stuck in 2008. In another, he doubled down. If people didn't get what we were going for, maybe superhero movies aren't for them anymore. The internet erupted. Marvel fans, the very ones who had spent years begging for a proper Fantastic Four reboot, felt insulted. TikTok creators stitched the clips with sarcastic captions like, "Thanks for ruining our childhood," and "Reed Richards? More like Rude Richards." Fan pages that had hyped Pedro's casting went dark. Some deleted every post about it. Reddit threads titled, "Did Pedro just nuke his own fan base?" climbed to the top of the MCU forums. Then came the podcast. Pedro, speaking freely, described Marvel's rewrites as soulless studio notes and joked that Fantastic Four would have been better if they'd just let him run with it. At one point, he compared Reed Richards to Elon Musk and spandex and said Marvel wasn't ready for that. For a studio obsessed with brand image, it was a nightmare. Marvel's PR team reportedly went into lockdown, replacing Pedro's scheduled live interviews with pre-recorded segments. Producers stopped mentioning his name in promotional material. Behind the scenes, leaks started pouring out. Crew members claimed Pedro was difficult on set, showing up late to table reads and skipping rehearsals entirely. He allegedly insisted on only taking direction from his personal acting coach, someone Marvel had to fly in at their own expense. Entire shooting days were lost to what Pedro called character recalibration sessions, where production would halt so he could find the emotional truth of a scene. Co-stars began to keep their distance. One insider claimed nobody wanted to talk to him between takes. Another described the set as a minefield of ego and exhaustion. By now, the damage wasn't just public, it was personal. Marvel executives, once praising Pedro as the face of the MCU's future, were calling him volatile and a brand risk in internal memos. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because while Pedro's words were alienating fans, something else was happening that would push this fiasco from bad to catastrophic. The arrival of a box office rival no one saw coming. One that would humiliate Fantastic Four in a way Marvel had never experienced before. Long before critics shredded Fantastic Four, and before Pedro Pascal's Dubai disappearance became a trending topic, the trouble had already been brewing, and it was brewing on set. According to multiple insiders, Pedro came into production with his own vision for Reed Richards, and that vision didn't exactly match Marvel's. The original script painted Reed as a calm, hyper-intelligent leader, a man defined more by precision than charisma. Pedro? He wanted something louder, sharper, more sarcastic. He didn't just request tweaks, he demanded them. One production source claimed that in the first month alone, Pedro had rewritten or improvised so much dialogue that continuity became a nightmare. Writers scrambled to adjust entire story arcs on the fly. What started as a little more personality for Reed Richards quickly evolved into entire scenes being overhauled. Then came the cameos. Marvel had planned a handful of fan service moments, including a Doctor Strange appearance that tied Fantastic Four directly into the wider MCU. Pedro reportedly hated the idea, calling it cheap distraction and pushing for more solo Reed moments instead. One insider put it bluntly, he wanted the movie to be about Pedro Pascal, not the Fantastic Four. At first, Marvel tried to play along. They gave him room to experiment, allowed extra takes for improvisation, and even let him workshop lines directly with the writers. But the demands kept escalating. Pedro allegedly fought against certain costume designs, rejecting 2 different suits before settling on one that required expensive last-minute adjustments. He pushed for lighting changes mid-shoot, halting entire days of filming for what he called emotional tone alignment. On multiple occasions, he refused to film unless the set was altered, sometimes over details as small as the placement of a prop. It wasn't just creative tension, there were scheduling issues too. Crew members say Pedro was frequently late to table reads and skipped several full-day rehearsals entirely. When he was present, he sometimes walked off set to confer with his acting coach, a Hollywood outsider flown in on Marvel's dime, instead of taking direction from the film's actual director. The result? Weeks of delays. Entire action sequences scrapped and rebuilt. Reshoots stacking up so high the budget ballooned by tens of millions. The atmosphere on set became controlling. One executive described it as hostile, paranoid, and completely unpredictable. Meetings were canceled to avoid blow-ups. Co-stars stopped interacting with Pedro outside of takes. By the end of filming, one Marvel producer allegedly told a colleague, "We didn't cast a lead, we cast a liability." That label would stick, because when a $300 million blockbuster implodes, the blame doesn't just vanish into the credits, it finds a face. And Marvel was starting to make it very clear whose face that would be. The final day of filming should have been a celebration. Instead, it felt like a funeral. Marvel wrapped the shoot with no cast party, no big send-off, no group photos. Everyone simply went home. Pedro Pascal left without a word to most of the crew. From there, the PR machine should have kicked in. Interviews, magazine covers, playful late-night talk show bits. But Marvel had another plan: damage control. Pedro's name was quietly removed from press schedules. His face disappeared from certain promotional graphics. Even the official Marvel social media accounts started posting group shots of the cast where Pedro was cropped out or absent entirely. Behind the scenes, executives were having a very different conversation. Internal emails leaked describing Pedro as radioactive and a brand liability. Plans for a Fantastic Four sequel, already storyboarded, were paused indefinitely. Animated spin-offs featuring Reed Richards were shelved. And perhaps most dangerous of all, Kevin Feige himself reportedly refused to mention Pedro's name in Phase 7 planning meetings. The reasoning became clearer as whispers about the legal side started leaking. Buried deep in Pedro's Marvel contract was something actors pray never gets triggered: the morality clause. In plain terms, it allowed Marvel to seek damages if a star's behavior caused reputational harm or financial loss to the franchise. And after Fantastic Four's implosion, the box office drop, merch failure, social media meltdowns, Marvel believed they had a rock-solid case. One source claimed legal teams were combing through every interview Pedro had given, every social post, even his deleted apology statement, which critics had already roasted as a soulless PR draft. Another insider said Marvel calculated the total financial fallout, from canceled licensing deals to merchandising losses, at around $120 million. They wanted it back. Meanwhile, Pedro remained silent in Dubai. No rebuttal, no explanation, no attempt to win back the fans. It was as if he'd vanished entirely from Hollywood. Inside Marvel Studios, the mood shifted from panic to something colder: reality. They weren't going to fix this. They were going to erase it. Plans for Fantastic Four Part 2 were officially scrapped. Merchandising partnerships were canceled. An animated spin-off featuring Reed Richards mentoring the Young Avengers? Gone. Even Phase 7 storylines were rewritten to remove his character entirely. It wasn't just about ending Pedro's run. It was about pretending it never happened. PR firms were brought in, not to rehabilitate his image, but to create distance between Marvel and its once golden lead. Press kits were edited to exclude his name. Old promotional clips featuring Pedro were quietly pulled from Marvel's YouTube channel. Leaked internal emails revealed the final nail in the coffin. Marvel's legal team was moving forward with a morality clause case. The target? Up to $120 million in damages. Not because Pedro personally cost them that much, but because that's what Marvel claimed the collapse had cost in total. Licensing deals, merch contracts, streaming negotiations, and perhaps most damaging, the loss of trust from their own fanbase. Industry insiders began whispering a phrase no actor wants to hear: career destruction. Agents hesitated to take his calls. Studios avoided his name in pitch meetings. Streaming platforms passed on projects attached to him. Could he make a comeback? Maybe, but it would take years, a complete rebrand, and a public image overhaul so convincing that audiences forgot he ever wore the blue suit. And in an industry where the news cycle resets every 24 hours, disappearing for that long might mean disappearing forever. For Marvel, the decision was easy. They'd move on. They'd bury the memory of Fantastic Four alongside every other failed experiment. And they'd make sure no future star ever looked at a $300 million franchise and thought they were bigger than it. Because in Hollywood, when $1 billion house burns down, someone always takes the fall. And this time, it wasn't a supervillain. It was the hero who was supposed to save it.